while Carl's queuing that up, just some general insight or context is Prince William from the royal family, along with some collaborators of his, started this in 2020, and they made their first round of prizes in 2021. It's 5 prizes of £1 million per prize, and it's all about initiatives that will help in this decisive decade to get humanity onto a better course and course correction with our relationship with planet Earth. So go ahead and press play there, Carl. Thank you.
Can you folks hear it? Or
yes, yeah, just perfect.
Ours is a world of wonder. Every day it reminds us of its beauty. It touches us, teaches us, and astounds us. But it also warns us that what we throw away does not go away. That higher temperatures mean a lot more than longer summers. That we can no longer take life as we know it for granted. We are at a unique stage in our history. Never before have we had such an awareness of what we are doing to the planet. And never before have we had the power to do something about that. We face a series of unprecedented challenges to nature and life on Earth. But humans have an extraordinary power to solve the greatest of challenges. We invent, navigate, see, cure, travel, move, participate, demonstrate. The most audacious of them all, to land a man on the moon. The moon shot.
We choose to go to the moon in this decade and do the other things, not because they are easy, but because they are hard.
A seemingly impossible task that over a single decade became a reality. And along the way, united the world. It's that same spirit that can guide us today as we confront these serious challenges we face on Earth. This year, Prince William and a global alliance launched the most prestigious environment prize in history, the Earthshot Prize. The global prize designed to motivate and inspire a new generation of thinkers, leaders, and dreamers to think differently. Visionaries rewarded over the next decade for responding to the great challenges of our time. A decade of action to repair our planet. The Earthshot Prize. Coming soon.
All right. Thanks, Carl. I don't know, was that David Attenborough?
I believe so. It sounded like him.
Those easily recognizable voices. So yeah, I mean, this the decisive decade, as well as the UN Convention on Biological Diversity, the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change is setting out a new agenda for this 2020 to 2030 decade. And so the language of the decisive decade has come in, and really what we're looking to promote and sort of shine a light on is that okay, Carl, let's see. what we're looking to shine a light on is the fact that in some cases it's an oversimplified view to say that climate change is causing certain problems. For example, the recent flooding in Abbotsford, there was a big rain that happened on the West Coast, and farmland in Abbotsford was flooded. And my heart really goes out to those people who were struggling with their livelihoods and their homes, their very existence. But it's oversimplification to just say that that was the fault of climate change, because the reality is that there was 100 years ago, there was a lake there in Abbotsford, and the indigenous peoples of that part of this province, Chief Silver had talked to me a few years ago about how they had opposed the draining of that lake for access to agricultural land, and that the elders 100 years ago had warned about this very type of a situation where Mother Nature would essentially reestablish that lake, and the kind of risk that we expose ourselves to when we don't follow the guidance of the elder societies of this country, the indigenous societies. And so these are the kinds of perspectives. We're going to be looking at indigenous innovations across Canada that are sort of providing that guidance and that opportunity to course correct in the decisive decade. So maybe what I'll do, Carl, if I have the ability to share screen, and I think I do, I'll share the video with Rachel Moriarty. So Rachel is based in London. She's I think she's the head staff for prize design and promotion with the Earthshot Prize. And she came to us yesterday in a meeting that we were able to have, because she's wonderful to have you with us. She's 8 hours ahead of us, so we had to be creative in how to get her involved in the Zaag'idiwin event. So I'll say no more now. I'll press play and let you hear from Rachel here. It's Rachel from the Earthshot Prize. Oops. Wonderful to have you with us, Rachel from the Earthshot Prize. Big time zone difference for us, so it's always an added logistical feat to get together. To have you with us today to speak about yourself and the Earthshot Prize on this special Valentine's Zaag'idiwin online celebration. So please introduce yourself, Rachel.
Thanks so much, Eli. It's a real pleasure to be here. And yes, noting the time zone, I know it's early morning there and late afternoon, evening here. So my name is Rachel Moriarty. I'm the head of prize design and impact at the Earthshot Prize, which is a global environmental prize that was launched in 2020. It's designed to be the most ambitious environmental prize in history. And it's based on the Moonshot Challenge. So it's based on the idea that actually there are solutions out there to some of the greatest challenges that we face. And we need to really harness the human ingenuity that we know is abundant in it all over the world, and to make sure that we do tackle some of those issues. And the idea is really behind the Earthshot Prize is that we want people to feel more optimistic about the possibility of solving some of these challenges. You know, that optimism should really be grounded in a belief that there are solutions out there, and what we need to do is help them to scale their impact. So the prize is based on, rather than moonshots, 5 Earthshots, and they are based on the biggest planetary challenges that we face. So the Earthshots are protect and restore nature, clean our air, revive our oceans, build a waste-free world, and fix our climate. And the idea is that you can't tackle one of these in isolation. We have to tackle all of these challenges if we want to live on a sustainable planet, and if we want to create a sustainable planet for our children. So each year we award 5 prizes, so one for every Earthshot. And each of those prizes, each of those winners rather, gets £1 million to scale the impact of their work. And we also give a huge amount of support to all of our winners. So to make sure that it's not just celebrating achievement that's already happened, it's actually, a catalyst to make sure that the impact of that they're already having can be scaled globally. So, for example, if you're a city in Italy that's doing amazing things on waste, as one of our winners from this year is the city of Milan, then we want to make sure that we can scale what you're doing to other cities around the world. Equally, if you're a grassroots movement in the Democratic Republic of Congo, we want to help you to, we want to help others to replicate what you're doing. We want to help you to build up your movement. So the idea is that we're taking these things from all corners of the world and replicating them, scaling them, and basically making sure that others can learn from them and build that momentum. I'm very, very lucky to have the role where I lead the search and selection process, which is incredibly exciting. It means that I get to see the nominations as they come in every year, and then take them through the screening stage and select the ultimate winners. And we run a nominator-based process. So rather than the innovators themselves needing to fill in a nomination form and to apply to us, we have this amazing network of organizations, and it can be NGOs, movements, academic institutions like universities, businesses, any organization that has a real strong commitment to sustainable development or to grassroots activism when it comes to the environment and protecting nature. And they make up our nominators. And they're the real heroes and experts here, because they have these wide networks. They know what innovation is happening, what kind of movements are being built from the grassroots up, and they nominate those for the prize. And then we screen all of those nominations and eventually choose our 5 winners. But that's not kind of the end of the story. It's not, if you don't win, then you don't get anything. We're looking for ways that we can support nominees beyond just the winners. So we give tangible scaling support to all our finalists. We also create other opportunities like networking opportunities for other shortlisted nominations to make sure, if you're part of the Earthshot Prize family, we can help you as much as we possibly can. So we're incredibly reliant on and grateful to all of our nominators for kind of bringing us the innovators and the activists and the leaders who will ultimately become the winners for the Earthshot Prize each year. We're super grateful that IPCA Foundation are one of our nominators this year, particularly because it's really important for us that the Earthshot Prize represents and celebrates Indigenous leadership. We know that Indigenous communities are some of the most effective stewards of the environment that we have. We need to learn from them, we need to support them and celebrate them. And so that's a key thing that we really want to come through in the nominations. We want to be able to award Indigenous stewards of nature through the prize. So we're super happy that IPCA are one of our nominators this year, and hopefully for many years to come. And really excited to see some of those nominations being put forwards.
Oh, that's wonderful. I have to say, when I got the email before Christmas, I thought maybe it was a spam email or something. And then I saw it was, it delved into the details with Kristen Walker and Conservation International. And then I got pretty excited. And because the opportunity that we see at the IPCA Foundation is to shine a light on the innovations that are happening every day at the watershed level across Canada and certainly in other parts of the world. We've been engaging most recently with the new Biden-Harris government on trans-border conservation initiatives across the Canadian-US border as well, and down in Costa Rica and such. So very exciting to have that opportunity and to sort of chime in with this decisive decade. The dialogue around the decisive decade, I think, is really important to empower ourselves over the remaining 9 years of this decade to make a positive change. And like you said, to give people hope that, the doomsday machine is always pumping out the media about that, all the problems that we're facing. But what about all the solutions that we have out there? So yeah, I'm really happy that you're doing that and to be able to be a part of it. We're going to be chatting amongst the board of directors of the Isak Alam Foundation, and our co-founder hopefully can join us as well, Monica Shore, later after this clip plays, to talk in more detail about the process that we have envisioned. But in short, and just to reflect with you on why we chose Valentine's Day to make this announcement, we want to, following the Valentine's Zaag'idiwin event, we're going to have a week of interviewing happening, where we've got several of our staff people that are going to be conducting similar interviews as this Zoom interview, actually, with innovators that we've been working with, and some that we are just meeting right across Canada, Indigenous leaders. Some of them are elected, some of them are knowledge holders, elders, and such. And then over that week, we're going to then kind of solidify a group of IPCA innovators on our website, and then pump that out. And hopefully the Earthshot Prize can help us kind of bring attention to those as well, through social media and such. And then have an opportunity for the public to weigh in sort of in the last week of February on their favorite Earthshot, IPCA Earthshot innovation. And then in early March, we'll be finalizing our nominations, and I believe the deadline is March 4th for having those in.
Yeah.
Nice.
That's so exciting. I love the idea of getting people to kind of vote for their favorite, because it's like you mentioned, it's so important to champion things that fill people with hope rather than despair. We need the urgency, of course, because the issues are urgent and we do face a climate emergency, but we need to kind of match that with energy and enthusiasm. And so I think getting people involved is so important, bringing people along. We want to make sure that when people see our winners standing on stage, that they affiliate with them, they feel represented, they feel like they could support things like that in their own country or beyond their own country. So I think that's a great way of doing things.
Perfect. And then lastly, the Valentine's Zaag'idiwin event. This is our second year doing the online celebration and discussion series. We were initially inspired on a New Year's Eve, and this was the New Year's Eve of 2019 turning into 2020. So 2020 turning into 2021, with an online discussion series celebrating the sunset of the Aichi targets under the UN Convention on Biological Diversity. And there was a bit of heated conversation about collaboration and extending olive branches and such, and to government, which in many situations, government, there's positive things that are happening, and then there's also still some of the old ways of resource management and oppressive or aggressive policy towards Indigenous peoples. And so we, at that point, the idea of Zaag'idiwin came into the conversation, which is this Indigenous concept of love that comes from observations in nature, as taught to me by Dr. John Burroughs from the Indigenous Law faculty at the University of Victoria, who will be joining us on the third day of this Zaag'idiwin event. The concept of Zaag'idiwin is where it's about abundance, where many tributaries feed a river, and the river brings those nutrients to the estuary and deposits those nutrients there. And this is where we find the most abundance in the environment. And so the idea is when we invoke that concept of love in our human relations, we're saying, let us not have a transactional or I win or you lose, this competition. Let us have a relationship of abundance. And so we're having our second year looking at that. And when I brought the concept up to you, it kind of resonated with you a little bit as well, didn't it? This idea of abundance.
Yeah, I love the idea of abundance. It's actually something that we really try and reflect in our values, not just for the Earthshot Prize outward looking, but actually as a team as well. And this mentality that, the winners of the Earthshot Prize, one of the things that they need to build in is inclusivity. They need to bring people in. They shouldn't they shouldn't be pitting people against each other. And we don't really want to do that. Prizes and competitions are a great way to stimulate new ideas. But what we don't want is for it to kind of turn people off because they feel this scarcity mentality and there's only so much to go around. Actually, what we found in our finalists and winners this year is they all have this mentality of supporting others, supporting others in their network, in the same field as them, and being able to really shine a light on a whole area, which actually should make that area thrive even more. But I think it just resonated so much with me that you have this. I think it's fantastic. It's how we should all see the world. And I think it's also important for us to think of repairing the planet not as something where we'll have to make just sacrifices. That there will be sacrifices that we have to make, but actually the world that we'll create will be better. It will be fairer. It will be more equitable and more, people will be, will have better lives, it won't just be a case that we're just doing the minimum and we're all having to give up so much. Actually, we need to innovate, we do need to sacrifice, and we do need to cut back on fossil fuels, but to get rid of fossil fuels. And we need to also kind of see it as an opportunity to create this world of abundance that will be better for all of us.
Lovely. All right. Well, I think we've nailed all the main points here. So I thank you for spending the end of your day with me to set the stage for this year's Zaag'idiwin event. And maybe just as we're concluding, and on your last note there about it's not just about the 5 prize winners. I understand that this year you're going to do a bit of a different approach where there's a pool of 100 front runners, and then you're going to have a series of sort of 30 from that 100, and then 15 from the 30, and then ultimately sort of building up to the 5 award winners with different levels of support across there. We look to emulate that as well in our approach to nominations. Because we do have an active network of universities, civil society organizations, some government agencies and such that have pulled together a national program called Conservation Through Reconciliation. And there's still quite a bit of support there. So we're going to emulate your approach that TEP is taking in 2022 to provide that additional support to the sort of community of IPCA innovation that is happening. So I'm really happy to know that that's what you're doing this year.
Sure. I think building a community is so important because for us, we get such amazing nominees each year, and some of them could be perfect in 2 years' time. They're just slightly too early, for example. But we don't want them to disappear forever. We don't want to say, sorry you didn't win this year, and then we never see them again. We want them to be part of the family. We want to nurture that, and because it's in everyone's best interest for them to succeed. So I think, yeah, creating that support system is so important. And actually, it's one of the things that I love about our nominators is they're so keen to support the innovators, not just by nominating them, but actually by kind of, helping them and helping them develop. So I think that's pretty
Cool. All right. So lovely to speak with you again, Rachel, and look forward to this year's process and excited to see who's going to win at the end of the year.
Yes, me too. Thanks so much, Eli. I hope the event goes really well. Bye.
Oops. Okay, how are we doing there? So yeah, that Rachel Moriarty, classic British name, right? Isn't that from, isn't Moriarty one of the characters in that old mystery show? What is that called, Emily?
I am not up to date on my old British mystery show. Sorry. I'm more
It is
into
Sherlock Holmes.
Sherlock Holmes.
Yeah, Sherlock
yes.
Holmes.
Oh,
All
okay.
right. Moriarty, good stuff. But anyways, yeah, so I think, when I delved into the process a little bit, of course, there's some irony there, of course, with, in this, I heard Prince William's father, Prince Charles, speak at a conference in, I think it was 2015, the Indigenous Terra Madre. And people were all confused and a little bit excited by, why is this royal representative talking to an Indigenous conference about sustainability? When, of course, so much has happened at the hands of the royal family globally, and they're very aware of that. And Prince Charles argued that all of the problems that we normally point to that are challenging civilization on Earth today, whether it's war or pollution or greed or capitalism, he argued that these are all just symptoms of an underlying root problem, and that root problem being a cultural paradigm or a worldview of disconnectedness, and really took ownership of that from the British perspective and how much damage had been done, and recognized that it was the Indigenous perspective of the interconnection of all things that was actually needed for making true progress in the world. And so this was whatever, 7 years ago. And so now it's interesting to see his son take up this initiative to incentivize and to spur on innovations for the decisive decade, and now in particular showing interest in what Indigenous peoples are doing in that regard. So we have with us one of our board members, Pierre Iacchetti, and we also have one of our team partners there, Taktum, as well, who's joined us. I don't know if Taktum, if you can join us by video. And of course, Carl is a member of our team. So what we want to do with the rest of today is just have a conversation, introduce members of the board of the Isaak Olam Foundation, share a little bit about what the Isaak Olam Foundation is, the work that it does, and then how we're going to promote Indigenous innovation in this year's Earthshot Prize, and actually in future years as well. So maybe with that, I'll just say a few words about the creation of the Isaak Olam Foundation. We've been dealing with a sick baby here for the past 7 days, so Monica is not up to Zooming today, which I don't blame her. So the Isaac Olam Foundation was founded in 2017. So this year is our 5-year incorporation anniversary. I myself, come from mixed heritage. I'm Nuu-chah-nulth on my father's side of my family, and on my mom's side, we're Dutch Mennonite immigrants. My grandfather immigrated to Canada in 1930. And so half my family is like blonde hair, blue eyes, and then half my family looks more like me. And so I've grown up with a very, and you know what Stephen Harper would call old stock Canadians, right? Like Mennonite farmers. So there's some irony at play here. So I've always kind of had a personal identity. It's been in states of crisis, I guess, at different states of my life and whatever. But growing up with a lot of racism, I think back to the 90s and the 80s in Manitoba, and it's quite bizarre actually to think about the level, the things that we grew up with, the things that you just take for granted. Nowadays people are feeling about being isolated, and like with all of the infringements on freedoms and such. And I think about how, like, when I was a boy, the aunties would say, travel in twos, like that's to avoid police attention, and this is just like, we're just a bunch just native boys in the city. But you couldn't walk down the street with 3 or more without attracting police, pull you over. They want to see what's in your bag, where are you coming from, where are you going to, run your name through the computers, see if there's any outstanding warrants and such. And so it was, it was very much, a very controlled sort of existence, where you're always feeling that. Anyways, and so with my own sort of evolution of identity, I had to kind of reconcile these two heritages that make up who I am. And so the words Jesus or church or Bible or Christ, these words had been weaponized not only against my Nuu-chah-nulth side of my family, but also, the Catholic Church had persecuted the Mennonites for many years because of their beliefs in Anabaptism. And so where I first started to become comfortable with my own kind of spiritual worldview was a conversation with my auntie Christina. My late father Albert, his little sister Christina, today runs a native church. She has been a pastor and supporting the folks on the downtown east side in Vancouver. And I had a conversation with her because she experienced what I like, my level of stuff was nothing compared to what my auntie experienced. Being an Indigenous woman of her generation was, a lot of discrimination, a lot of challenges that generation faced. And she talked about her own healing journey and how it was the deepening of her understanding of the Bible, that she was drumming and singing one day, and in our Nuu-chah-nulth language, and she was just hit with this beautiful epiphany that this is the way, this is the language and the song that was given to our people to celebrate creation and to celebrate Creator in our language, Nas. And so she started to equip me with concepts in our Nuu-chah-nulth language, and also recognizing that the person that we often refer to as Jesus actually never heard that word. His name was Yeshua, and he was, for all intents and purposes, an indigenous man from that part of the world. And so, and I started to kind of look around me, and I, see my Uncle Moses and my Uncle Joseph, and my name is Eli. A lot of these names come from the Torah, the first book. And I think that our Nuchanoth peoples really related with the tribes of Israel for the fact that they also lived a tribal life, and resonated much more with our people than the second book, the New Testament. And so anyways, this is a long roundabout way of saying that for my own survival, I think, my own identity, to survive the various trials and tribulations that I've come into in my life, ranging in scope of, seeing my sister be highly impacted by racism and violence in Manitoba, and myself having my own experience with that, and then losing my father when he was very young. I was 29 years old when my father passed away tragically. To be able to sort of survive that, I came up with my own kind of fusion of worldview and spiritual practice, and my own way of praying and meditation, to overcome the challenges that I face in my life. And so this fusion of worldviews came quite beautifully together with the formation of the Isaac Olam Foundation in 2017. Isaac coming from the Nuchanoth language, Olam coming from the Hebrew expression Tikkun Olam, to heal and improve the world. And we've dedicated ourselves to knowledge mobilization and capacity building for the protection and promotion of biological and cultural diversity. This is looking at that intersection of nature and the biodiversity in the world, and cultural and linguistic diversity. The United Nations Convention on Biological Diversity recognizes that there is indeed a extinction event that is happening, a biodiversity crisis that is happening in the world today. And what researchers have also correlated is that where there are islands of intact, thriving biological diversity that's still strong, there also correspondingly is islands of intact cultural and linguistic diversity. And recognizing that the genocide of cultures goes hand in hand with the disruption of original ecosystems for often plantations of single crops. For example, the palm plantations, tree farms here in British Columbia, cutting down the diverse rainforest to plant only one type of tree that is desired by the market, and then using fertilizers, pesticides, and herbicides to maintain that monoculture. And of course, English being the only language taught in schools here. Well, you get a little bit of French, but the eradication of the indigenous languages and the indigenous diversity of plants in the environment has gone hand in hand. And so when you really understand, the problem and what has led to the crisis that we're facing in the world today, then you can start to, come up with solutions. And I'm wondering if Taktem, if you're able to join us, I'd love for you to share, to introduce yourself. Maybe you weren't prepared to be put on the spot, but Taktem she's a forest ecologist that's recently joined our team, and she has done her research under one of the committee members or supervisors for her research was Suzanne Simard. who was a breakthrough forest ecologist who found that, in contrary to popular belief, plants and trees do not compete in a forest ecosystem for scarce nutrients. They actually support each other. They actually share nutrients, and they share life giving energy, and support each other. And so this idea is sort of well understood in many indigenous cultures and worldviews, and now is starting to be better understood in science as well. And so anyways, that's what the Isaak Olam Foundation is all about, protecting and promoting that biocultural diversity. We were formed in 2017, technically, but we didn't actually start doing anything until 2018. And we've kind of slowly but steadily grown. And now today we're co-hosting the Conservation Through Reconciliation Partnership, which is, I also want to acknowledge RJC Engineering, our 3 host organizations for this year's Valentine's Zaag'idiwin event is RJC Engineering, Creative Thinking Practical Solutions, something like this, and the Conservation Through Reconciliation Partnership, based out of the University of Guelph, and the Isaak Olam Foundation. So what I was saying there is that the Isaak Olam Foundation is one of 3 host organizations of the Conservation Through Reconciliation Partnership as well. And this year, in our 5-year anniversary, receiving the honor of becoming an official nominator for the Earthshot Prize, I think is a great milestone in the evolution of our organization. So currently we have 3 board members, myself, Art Napoleon, and Pierre Iacchetti. Art is triple booked this morning. He sends his regrets. Art Napoleon is from northeastern British Columbia, from Soto. He grew up raised by his grandparents, and he's a fluent speaker, singer-songwriter, award-winning singer-songwriter, and well-known kind of TV personality from the Moose Meat and Marmalade series, which is a travel food show, kind of with a reconciliation vibe to it. But he's also a former elected chief and politician, subject matter expert, and he has a degree from the University of Victoria in Indigenous language revitalization. So it's really good to have Art's perspective, because as I mentioned earlier, Isaak Olam is an education nonprofit focused on knowledge mobilization and capacity development. And we don't limit ourselves in terms of knowledge mobilization. We recognize that the arts are a major part of a paradigm shift and rethinking humanity and our relationship with the rest of creation. And so we've been doing modest video productions for a couple of years now. And so Art Napoleon is a good person to have on our board in a variety of ways. And Pierre Iacchetti and I have known each other for many years, going back to his first career in conservation work. And now he is doing his PhD at the University of Victoria in civil engineering. He's kind of recalibrating his career focus on clean energy, but broadly like resilience and sustainable development. Pierre, how about I turn the mic over to you for a bit to introduce yourself further?
Sure. Thank you for that, Eli. I'm actually still sitting with your words earlier about growing up in mixed culture. That was my experience. I was born in Barbados, and my mother's Afro-Caribbean. My father is Italian, and that's very similar to my upbringing. My mom was constantly saying, you have to be twice as better as everyone else because you're Black. They see you as, something less than. So it was always navigating those two cultures. And as Eli said, most of my career was in conservation and the environmental movement, but probably about 6 or 7 years ago, I became really disillusioned with it. It was the Nature Conservancy, land trust, conservation, big conservation organizations movement. And I did experience all kinds of subtle racism in that. It's no secret that the environmental movement in the conservation field has a very racist history. And so I just got tired of it and I shifted into other things. But I was so fortunate to reconnect with Eli and Monica, and they formed the Isaac Alam Foundation and asked me to come on board. And I was so happy to be able to do that because it's completely changed my way of being and my perspective around protected and conserved areas. So I'm really grateful to be here. I'm grateful to be involved with Isaac Alam Foundation. And thank you for having me.
Awesome. And Taktim, you're not yet ready to join us, are you? I didn't pre-warn her that I was going to ask her to speak, but anyone, maybe I'll introduce Carl. Carl's the most recent team member to join us. He is supporting us with administration, which is absolutely key for the sanity of Monica Shore. So she's, as I mentioned, she's been very much, we had a little 10-month-old baby, and Thea's been sick this week. So that's been her main focus. Monica, we kind of have a little bit of an organic, ethical space type way of managing Isaac Olam. Monica very much is the kind of director of operations. And so we've recently brought Carl on to work closely with Monica. Carl, do you want to introduce yourself and your background and such?
Yeah, hey, my name's Carl. I've been with Isaac Olam for just over a month now, joined in the start of January. And as Eli mentioned, Julia, my partner, is helping with childcare with them. So it's really lovely experience. We get to wake up together, drive to work together, and I think really connect with the work and connect with each other in a really meaningful and unique way that I'm very grateful for. And it's been amazing working with Eli and Monica and finding ways to support them in their work, and finding a balance of supporting with house stuff and work stuff, and just building that relationship of support, and kind of building out some background stuff to support and bringing on new stuff in the future with IOF. So it's been a great pleasure to work with them, and yeah. And
your educational background is at UVic?
Yeah, I studied business there, and I was pretty involved in student politics with the student society and the Senate of the university. So I have some experience working with large bureaucratic institutions and universities especially, which has been really neat to kind of continue that on in the work here, and bring kind of my background in kind of purpose-driven work to some really important work here in Canada.
Nice. Fantastic. We actually, it was a bit of a gamble to hire a couple like that. Carl's partner, Julia, has been just lovely with the girls as a full-time kind of nanny, and helping to make the home, baking cookies and such. And then Carl working on this side with Monica, getting things done every day and making sure we're chomping away at that to-do list always. A bit of a creative solution, especially during the pandemic, where sometimes you have to bubble up, and to be able to continue to operate an organization with childcare and support. It's actually, I couldn't be happier. Thank you so much for joining us, Carl, and for the work that Carl's done to help organize this year's Zaag'idiwin Valentine's Day event as well. It's going to be an event that is going to be reoccurring. And we're kind of choosing different subject matters every year. But one of the subjects I want to put on the radar for next year is masculinity, and ideas of Indigenous masculinity, and in general. I was reminded about that in a conversation with Monica earlier today, actually, and how a friend of ours, Elder Larry McDermott, in 2019, I was at a conference in Montreal, and a friend of mine was presenting at the front of this big kind of formal conference center, and she was talking about the recent loss of one of our elders from our organization, and she started crying. And she was apologizing, but she couldn't help herself. She was just so upset. And I went up and I sat with her to give her some comfort and support. And our elder, Larry McDermott, stood up and spoke, and he talked about how he said, one of his elders had told him to never apologize for crying, because that was our spirit coming to the surface. And as he said that, there was another gentleman in the front row who started to also weep profusely. And then I found myself weeping as well. And it was the first group cry that I had ever been involved in. And I had a series of epiphanies following that, where I had realized that I had been, since probably 9 years old, I had been actively suppressing my own spirit, because we're taught that that's girly to cry, or only, there's a voice inside your head that says, stop crying. That's, don't be a wimp or something like this, and we suppress as men. We suppress our own spirit in this kind of crazy society. So anyways, I was reminded of that recently, and this is something that maybe we can explore next year for the event. But I also am so happy to have Emily Gilpin join us as co-host for this event. And we've been kind of pulling ourselves together in good faith, with her being so far away and her technical difficulties and such. But I've admired Emily for many years now, and her ability to facilitate dialogue and dig into important issues. I first met her when she was with the National Observer, and then she was with Indigenews, and now she's off on other adventures. But I'd like to give you a chance, Emily, to introduce yourself and share some of your thoughts about the subject matter.
Masculinity. I have a lot of thoughts. We open the can. It's like, let's dive in. But yeah, Tanse, everybody. Hi. I'm really great to be here with you today, talking about clean energy, talking about solutions, talking about everything that's been brought up today. I'm a friend of Eli and Monica's, and also an admirer of Isak Olam and all the initiatives that they've been a part of. I myself am a mixed person. I'm a Michif person. I'm Métis through my grandmother, Irene Chartrand. And most of my Métis family still lives in the Paw, Manitoba. I myself grew up in Ontario. I'm also Filipina, and on my mom's side, Scottish and Irish roots. So I'm actually, quite mixed. And I, for a while, thought that meant I didn't really have a place to belong, or I was never enough of something. Or, there was always kind of a time up. I was invited in, invited out. But I've come to understand throughout my life that being a mixed person, it's my gift. I'm able to be a cross-cultural person. I'm able to understand it. It's being a mixed person has brought me to my job, actually, as a storyteller, as a journalist, as a witness, someone who observes and listens and is a vehicle for stories to be heard, someone who can be a mediator between different groups, different ways of thinking, because of embodying these different worlds. So that's brought me into this to this work of journalism. I was with Canada's National Observer for 3 years, leading a series called First Nations Forward that was all about highlighting strength-based stories of Indigenous communities in BC. And at first they were kind of like, you know, any stories that you want, but it really quickly became about clean energy projects, you know, innovative land use plans, marine management, Indigenous guardians. It really did come under this umbrella of so-called conservation and sustainability. But the more you dig, the more you realize it's actually Indigenous laws, you know, that we're getting to. It's getting into that legal landscape. So I had the great honor of reporting on, you know, strength-based stories and solutions for about 3 years. I ran an interview series called First Nations Forward with many different Indigenous leaders and thinkers, and you can find that on YouTube or Facebook. And then I took on the role as managing editor for Indigenews, which was an independent media outlet online that highlights stories in the Okanagan and across Vancouver Island, and that's limited to those regions just because of funding through the local journalism initiative. So I'm always going to be involved in, you know, what we call clean energy and Indigenous-led conservation and Indigenous laws, because I'm 30, but throughout these 30 years, I've come to understand that that is the truth. That's what it is. That's what the future of the planet is. Ancient cultures, from what I've been able to humbly witness, have a lot of really important connections. And for me, it comes back to natural law, to the law of the natural world, you know, and the supernatural world being a part of that as well. I've had the chance to witness some celebrations in the Afro-Indigenous community here of the Jare, which is a part of a Candomblé culture. And I see similarities too, as in terms of, you know, some of their ceremonies here, their connection to nature, to the natural world, you know, and abiding by some of those natural laws as well, whether it's fasting, sacrificing, offerings, whether it's dance, music, these kinds of traditions that again come from nature. And so you're not pushing against nature. So when people ask, you know, what is the future of the planet? How do we find solutions? It's like, ask the people who have been here and doing it and making it work for thousands and thousands of years. So anytime there's a conversation around Indigenous-led conservation, Indigenous protected areas, you can bet that I'll be there no matter where I am. You know, I'm a big fan and a big supporter of these conversations. So I'm really grateful to be here. And there's a couple people in the room here, this virtual room, that I don't know. And I'd love to hear, you know, just a brief introduction if folks are comfortable, but maybe just passing it around and, you know, just introducing yourself, Zeta and April and everyone else who haven't had a chance to speak.
Yeah, that's a great idea. Zeta, do you want to, we'll do the opposite alphabetical order here, from Z to A. And you're muted.
Thank you so much, Eli. It's such a delight to be here. I too, as Pierre and Emily have spoken, was very touched by telling us about your childhood. I actually am the child of a Holocaust survivor and grew up in a small town where we were the only Jewish family in Colorado. The only other family that was at all similar to us was a Chinese family. We had more in common with this other Chinese family than with anybody else. I am really, really happy to be here. We're working on a campaign to create some kind of special status for the waters of False Creek in Vancouver. But I thought what I would do, if that's okay, is I'd like to introduce my colleague, Eugenia Bertulis, who I think is online right now. She's been an important guide for me in learning new ways. As people can see, I am of the male persuasion. I come loaded up with all sorts of software routines that reside in my soul that auto-execute without a lot of thought. And Eugenia has been a very big help in helping me understand that the world we live in is more than human and that we need to learn from that. So thank you so much, Eli, and everybody here. We are so delighted to be here. Thank you.
Well said, Zadia. And so with that, over to Eugenia, who I've had the pleasure to meet now. I think this is the third occasion, but we'll let you introduce yourself and speak about your work, Eugenia.
Hi, everyone. It's really nice to meet you. I'm Lithuanian through my father, and he was a displaced person. And Lithuanian is a language that we spoke at home, but it was forbidden and banned under Soviet colonial occupation. And so the work around language is really interesting to me. And I'm German through my mother, and I've lived in Germany and Switzerland. And I now am here in Vancouver, and I teach interaction design and user experience design at Emily Carr University of Art and Design. And I'm really excited to work on these collaborations. And I wrote down, Eli, your comment about what you learned from your elders to never apologize for crying. It is our spirit coming to the surface. I have a lot of students who apologize for crying. And we talk a lot about it also being a professional pressure to be professional and not cry in a classroom or a work situation, and all the gendered issues that Zeta is mentioning. So I really appreciate that that comment. I will pass that along and say I heard from Eli Enns and his elders that when you cry, it is your spirit coming to the surface. And Zeta, you and I, of course, have talked a lot about how nice it is to be able to be with people we can trust to take our emotion. So I'm very grateful to be here and to hear and meet all of you.
Thank you, Eugenia. And yeah, Eugenia is part of this collaborative too around the False Creek, and an initiative that the Isak Olam Foundation is happy to support and collaborate with. Who else do we have here? And Patricia Saulis has joined us. I don't know if she's able to unmute or speak. She is going to be one of our panelists on Monday. We're grateful to have Patricia join us in a conversation about Indigenous economics, love-based economics. Patricia is Wolastoqey from New Brunswick, the Maliseet. I met her through her work with the Maliseet Conservation Council, but she's also like a Martin Luther King scholar and a whole bunch of other, does a lot of other really awesome things. So how about I let you introduce yourself, Patricia?
Sure, thank you. Thank you, Eli Wiliwin. Milda Liwis, Patricia Saulis. My name is Patricia Saulis. I'm from the Maliseet Nation at Tobic, which is in New Brunswick, as Eli has said. And I'm very glad to be here today. It's so very, very exciting to hear about all of the work that is being done, of course, and of course the Earthshot Prize and that initiative. Really at the, perhaps at the core of the colonial empire that to some would have said that has wrecked some of the consequence of what we're dealing with today. So it is meaningful that the family itself has taken this on and is supporting this. So I do appreciate seeing that type of movement. And I think it's really demonstrating some wonderful leadership for leadership around the world, that we need to listen to and acknowledge and affirm the efforts that Indigenous nations and communities are doing around the globe. And of course, here at home per se, we have taken that movement to heart. We are working on Indigenous protected and conserved areas here within Wolastoqey Maliseet territory. And so for those that may not know, our watershed, the Wolastoq St. John River, as it's known as, is actually a transboundary international watershed. And so we've been conducting work not only on our watershed, but upon learning of the great work that the Indigenous Circle of Experts had done a few years ago with regional engagement exercises here in Canada, that we came to learn of this wondrous opportunity that we became aware of and wanted to take part in. So for, I would say, about the last 4 to 5 years, we've been working quite earnestly towards reaching, having IPCAs designated within our territories, along with our fellow nations, the Mi'kmaq and the Beskamagati. And I see Kate here from one of our fellow Indigenous-led projects. And it's really exciting times. And I'm afraid to say it's also frustrating because we have encountered, as you may have heard here in New Brunswick, that the government has gone so far to take a stand that they will not even provide a land acknowledgement at the beginning of meetings, where, the simple truth of the matter of, we are on unsurrendered, unceded lands of our ancestors, that they are unwilling to acknowledge that any further. So the level of dispossession, not only of ourselves from our lands, continues on here. This colonial history is not just history, it is being maintained. And we really need to come together, work collaboratively as well as we can, and really achieve some things together that I think, we will all benefit from. I know none of us are actually doing this just on behalf of ourselves, like some other folks who are taking action currently. We are doing this for, our families, our future generations, and for the planet itself, because, deeply we recognize this is not about us as humans. It's really about how we are here to support and take care of each other. And that extends beyond just the human family. So thank you, Eli Zaag'idiwin, for allowing me to speak a bit here. And I really look forward to the conversations.
Awesome. Thank you for joining us and sharing. And I love your background there. Very festive to Valentine's. Nice. And I hope you're able to also join us tomorrow for the conversation on watershed love, because we're going to be talking about, I'd be interested to know how the relationship is going with Fredericton. And I know that there are some progressive leadership in the province, and it's a fascinating spectrum that's happening in your province there, in your homelands. Next, I'd like to ask Terry from RJC. Terry, RJC is co-sponsoring the Valentine's Zaag'idiwin event, and we've also recently created a unique position, a hybrid position that is collaborated between the Isak Olam Foundation and RJC Engineering. Maybe Terry, you can give us a high-level overview of what RJC is and what they do. And Eric Wilson, who couldn't join us today, but he's our shared staff person, and he's doing his PhD in civil engineering as well at the University of Victoria on empathy and engineering, which, hey, maybe that'll be a subject for next year's Valentine's Day. And he's also co-supervised by David Dunn from the business school, the Gustafson School of Business at UVic. Anyways, I'll pass the feather over to you, Terry, to introduce yourself and share some of your thoughts here.
Yeah, thanks, Eli. I thought I was going to get to skirt talking today. But yeah, thanks so much for allowing us to participate and be part of the program. I first got to know Eli and Pierre through Eric, and again, more on the engineering side of things. RJC is a privately held consulting firm. We've been around for 70 plus years, primarily into structures, but over the last 30 or 40 years, we've gotten into building resiliency, energy management, that kind of stuff. So that was the overlap with Eric and Pierre. And then through them, got to meet Eli and Monica and help Saco Lam with some of their project work. And then from there, I think that's really where the important work now has begun for us. I've been with the firm for a while. I've come into leadership. I sit on the board of directors, as Eli knows. And besides the work to help repair with the damage we've done to the planet through better buildings and more resilient buildings, we see a responsibility to help with truth and reconciliation and build better relationships with our Indigenous community members, which in the architectural engineering world really just, I think Zaida mentioned, we're hardwired for our type of people to think a certain way, and we see solutions and we see nothing else. We don't see other problems. We don't see other social challenges. And but the world has changed, and as people have come up into our industry, we realize that there's an important part to play, both from a community perspective and then just the regular engineering numbers and nuts and bolts. And that's the exciting part for me. I'm so happy to be able to participate and help move these initiatives forward. Just a little bit of my background. Obviously, I grew up at the time unaware of just the, I'm the apex example of privilege. I'm a tall white guy born into a middle class family and in the suburbs. But I was fortunate. I grew up, my parents never went past high school. My dad never finished high school, but he always, one of the, I'm paraphrasing for the listeners, never think of people the way others would want you to. I mess up, but just the stereotypes of other cultures. So I was fortunate. I had Southeast Asian friends. I didn't know many Indigenous kids growing up, just in our neighborhood. But I was always raised to believe, accept other cultures. My mom's family is Russian Doukhobor. She was the youngest child in her family that wasn't actually put in residential schools in southeastern BC. So a lot of my aunts and uncles on that side of the family dealt with challenges. I don't want to say the same as our Indigenous families did. It didn't go on for generations, but even that small pocket of family who had to deal with being separated from their loved ones and their family. I understood that a little bit. And then growing up, I met my wife in school. She's Filipina. Her parents emigrated here. They're actually part of a teacher program, and I think in the early 70s. So her parents first taught at native schools in Atlin, and then out in Dog Creek outside of Williams Lake. So she grew up, with a lot of Indigenous kids. So her background was, I think, a little bit more aware of the challenges and the inequities than certainly I was growing up. So when we grew up, I remember it was a big moment. Kind of punched me in the face when my 8-year-old girl, just out of the blue, we're in the grocery store and just looked, Dad, people treat me different when I'm out with you. It's like, and then just to think of there's so many people in Canada who deal with that as just daily, all the time. And again, just been completely ignorant to that. So having the opportunity through work and relationships with everybody here to be able to provide opportunity to people from different cultures and backgrounds and provide positive solutions in our built environment and prepare to the environment going forward, I think it's a great opportunity. I'm happy to be able to contribute personally and drag my firm and my colleagues in industry into the effort.
Wow, that's beautiful. Thanks for sharing that story. Getting to know you a little bit better all the time. I'm also really happy to see April Ingham join us today. I met April, I don't know how many years ago, but got to know her better through her work with the Pacific People's Partnership. And she came to our our productive retreat. I think it was 2016 with Takaya and such. That was right before the whole IPCA movement took off, April. So really happy to have you here. And I know you're on new adventures as well. So maybe you want to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about what you're up to these days.
Hi, Eli. Hi, everybody. It's really nice to be here with you. And it's incredible to hear, everybody's perspectives and also a lot more about the work that's happening and about the Earthshot Prize. I'm coming to you today from the Sauk Nation traditional territories of the Coast Salish Sea here on Vancouver Island. And recently I've just ended my 12 and a half years with Pacific Peoples Partnership as their ED. And, I'm really happy to be transitioning and passing that torch because it's such a wonderful organization. But I've been working as an ally to Indigenous peoples globally for the last, probably 15 years or so. I am myself a mixed blood person as well, and still on a journey to understand my own Indigenous roots, but they go back into the prairies around St. Paul, Alberta. It's really great to be here and to learn more about the important work that is happening with IPCA Earthshot. Through my last work at Pacific Peoples Partnership, I was able to partner with them on really innovative projects like Indigenous kindergartens in nature and developing online curriculum that looks at sustainability issues with highlighting the Indigenous leaders in these causes. And I look forward to continuing this work, kind of embarking on my new adventures, and it's pretty exciting. I see the horizon and all the important work that we can do together globally, and look forward to continuing to support the work of IPCA and to Indigenous leaders and conservationists and communities everywhere in whatever way that takes. And I look forward to listening to the presentations tomorrow, Patricia, and hearing about what's happening in your water sheds, and excited to hear about the False Creek, water initiatives as well. And also shout out to Pierre. I used to live in Barbados, so I appreciate that country very much and miss it a lot. Really happy to be here and looking forward to learning more. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you, April. I met Genevieve, is it? Genevieve. I think that's the lady that the new company you're working with and film or such. Very inspirational person and big supporter also of Indigenous-led conservation. So it'll be exciting to collaborate with you all moving forward. And Kelly Bedford has also joined us. So happy you could be here, Kelly. I got to know Kelly through his work with West Coast Wild and making the zip line in the Ha'ukman Tribal Park a truly remarkable experience. And he's very respectful. I want to say young man, but he's probably older than me, but very respectful guy and great, ambassador for bringing people to experience our territory on the west coast of Vancouver Island. But over to you, Kelly, to introduce yourself better.
Hey, thank you, Eli. Yeah, it's a real pleasure and honor to be here today. Thank you very much. I come from Lequiltok traditional territory on Vancouver Island, so the post-colonial name would be Campbell River. I have the honor and privilege of working and spending most of my year in traditional Tlaloquit Hahouthi or territory, the Ha'ukman. So yeah, my real jam is really supporting Eli's efforts, and I believe strongly in IPCAs as being a really key answer to our futures as this planet and our species and the biodiversity that we really need. I really support experiential education. So that's I harness that, take people out, kind of a little sneaky, take them out thinking that they're on an adventure, but then show them a whole new world of respect and what I've learned from people like Elder Joe Martin about natural law and the history of the land and where people are and who we are when we're visiting. So I'm also an entrepreneur and hope to be working with different First Nations to help change the paradigm and how lands and forests can actually make that essential colonial need of money, but be left alone. Leave that traditional investment that ancestors have put in for future generations. Just leave it as it is to heal and to grow and become better. So yeah, I'm just excited to be here and support this in any way I can. Yeah, I thank you very much for having me.
Awesome. Thank you, Kelly. And for anyone else who's on the line, but like Leah or Kate or Shalu, talk to them. I met Shalu recently via, I think Emily was our common connection there. She works with Discourse Media, and she's doing some great work there. But if anyone else wants to, unmute and introduce yourself, say a few words, feel free to. Otherwise, we'll start heading towards a wrap-up conversation about the process that the Earthshot Prize, the IPCA Earthshot Prize is going to be taking. Going once.
I just, sorry, I can't turn my camera on at the moment, but I just wanted to say thank you so much for hosting this. As my conversation with Eli a couple days ago really has been something that I'm still digesting at the moment. I feel like I learned a lot, and I'm still learning a lot about Indigenous-led conservation and IPCAs, and I'm just really grateful for more opportunities to learn. So thank you so much for hosting this and for inviting us.
Great, awesome. Thanks for being here. Kate.
Yeah, I just thought I'd say hello since Patricia shouted me out earlier. Thanks, Patricia. I work for the Passamaquoddy Recognition Group, and we work within the Zaag'idiwin territory. But I'm St. Stephen most of the time, and I work with Patricia and the MTI and the other nations so the Micmac, the Wolastoqey, on other IPCAs. We're the Wabanaki, New Brunswick group that are trying to push our IPCAs to get going, and we're looking at strategies together. We recently did a whole workshop on this great report. It's the Integrating Indigenous Rights and Private Conservation in Canada. So that was great. And yeah, I'm just glad to be here. I wasn't expecting to get shouted out or talk, but last year I was on this Zaag'idiwin event and I just kind of listened. But it's nice to say hi. So hello, everyone. I'll leave it at that.
Wonderful. And what dedication working on or participating on a weekend in this work. Good for you, Kate. Leah or Taktum, no pressure, by the way. I'll brag a little bit more about Taktum. She's, as I mentioned, just recently joined our team. She's originally from Iran, and she taught me how to say that word properly, Iran. And she joining our team with Sude, from both of them from Iran, and Taktum with her background in forest ecology, and Sude with cooperative management from Simon Fraser University in the Resource Environmental Management program there. Really great to have them on our team, not only with their expertise, but the values that they bring, which are very much appreciated. But I don't think I'm going to get her off to mute her thing there. So perhaps now we could, it's not a huge groundbreaking announcement per se, but I think it could be very consequential. What we've decided to do, and there's been a bit of strategy that has gone on here for the last, since I got the news, our original, my misunderstanding from the beginning was that I thought we only got to make 2 nominations. And so we thought, given the fact that we are only allowed to do 2 nominations, we would kind of choose one ourselves, like the board of directors of Isaaq Olam and our staff would choose a project and nominate it. And then we would do a more public process where we would we would get members of the public to vote on their favorite IPCA innovation to be selected for nomination. Well, now that has actually changed significantly, where we've actually discovered that we have unlimited nominations, but that comes with work. It's about 2 hours. We've gone through our first one just yesterday. I think Toctum actually undertook that. An hour and 45 minutes paperwork to go through all, and there's still some questions unanswered. So, so that's the only limitation. There's so many IPCA innovations across Canada that are worthy of this prize. I often describe to people who aren't familiar with Indigenous leadership in Canada, but it's like having dozens of our own Nelson Mandelas. I've met so many elders that are so not just knowledgeable of their culture and the land, but also humble and forgiving in the face of so much discrimination that they've faced. And I'm thinking particularly right now in this moment of a group of elders from Treaty 7 territory in southern Alberta who shared, I witnessed a pipe ceremony that they shared with newcomers from the Canadian Wildlife Federation. And just it brought tears to my eyes to hear these words of compassion and from elders who clearly had experienced some of the worst aspects of racism and residential schools and all the rest of it. And so truly, this is for me on the scale of the kind of humanity and leadership that people like Nelson Mandela has shown in South Africa. So anyway, so we're not limited. We're only limited by the paperwork itself. So we are going to be, rather than doing selecting one through a voting process, we're going to leave it open. Carl and I worked through this yesterday, that we're going to leave it open for people to come forward with their IPCA innovations. And it doesn't have to strictly be within the IPCA kind of paradigm either. An example is the Bison Treaty or the Buffalo Treaty, that there's a group in Banff, Alberta. It's led by Leroy Littlebear, and he's managed to get many First Nations on both sides of the border to sign on to this Buffalo Treaty, this Bison Treaty, for the revitalization of bison. And so even though they're not under the IPCA acronym per se, this is right bang on to what we're talking about. So that type of initiative could qualify to be nominated as well. And so we're going to have that open until February 28th. And then at that point in time, we're going to be getting all of our paperwork together for final submission on March 4th. And probably have it ready by March 3rd and submit it by March 3rd. And then following that, that's just really where it gets started, because we're going to be doing a parallel process with the Earthshot Prize and kind of hooking on to the hot air balloons as they go out, with getting into their Twitterverse and all the hashtags and such, and really amplifying these IPCA innovations into that global platform. So the idea here is to leverage like heck our status as a nominator to promote, even if one of our nominations doesn't get selected for the ultimate prize, the Earthshot Prize people have developed some ways that they can provide benefit. Like say, for example, last year, they didn't see this coming, but they just did 5 nominations, five awards. And there was, after that, there was a whole bunch of investors and philanthropists who were approaching them and saying, we would love to get access to your database of all the other nominations, because even though only 5 at one, you can imagine there's all these really worthwhile initiatives that have been nominated. And somebody did the work to fill out two hours worth of paperwork. But they were unprepared for that, and they had not kept any of those previous in their database. So this year they've learned from year one, and this year they're going to start off with a pool of 100 front runners that will all be promoted. And then of that 100, 30 will be selected. This group of 30 has a next level of support and promotion. And then from the 30, 15 are selected. 5 of the 15 will ultimately win the £1 million prize. And then 10 get hooked up directly with philanthropists and investors. There's a higher level of kind of care for those other 10 finalists. And so what we're going to be doing is we're going to be paralleling that process in something we're calling the IPCA Earthshot. And I've already started to talk with philanthropists about this, so that we're going to kind of use this first year to build our own Earthshot prize. And Leah is introducing herself on the chat. Thank you, Leah, for doing that. So yeah, with this IPCA Earthshot, we're going to kind of emulate what parts of the Earthshot prize work, and we have ongoing nominator status for the rest of the decade. So we're not limited to 2022. So we'll be much better prepared for next year. But this year, we're going to take it as a trial run to really sharpen our tools on how we can promote these IPCA innovations. And similarly, we're going to maintain a database, and this will be the big announcement on Monday. I can give a little bit of foreshadowing, but because I've mentioned it already in the media, but without going into all the details, we're launching something called the IPCA Development Fund. Patricia's jumped on board to help guide and grow that fund, and a bunch of other incredibly innovative nation builders across Canada. A lot of people from the Indigenous Circle of Experts are on that, and the Indigenous Leadership Initiative. So the IPCA Development Fund is going to keep a database of these IPCA innovations. And so that similarly to this strategy that Earthshot Prize is doing with 130, 15, and 5, we're going to be keeping a database so that when we're putting out our balloons into social media and kind of riding on the coattails of all of the tweets from the Earthshot Prize, we're going to be funneling attention, micro donations or big philanthropy, investors in IPCA industries and such. We're going to be funneling all that back into the IPCA Development Fund and the IPCA Innovation Program. So you heard it first from the horse's mouth here. And I'm really glad that Patricia's on here. I was so excited when Patricia came back from a conference in Quebec, I think it was, about the deep green economy or something like this, and just talking about what are the possibilities, rather than putting ourselves in this position where we're victims of oppression, victims of genocidal policies and such, which all that is true, but we don't have to stay there. We can take up the role of innovators and driving solutions. And of course, it is through those hardships that the most resilient people are born. And so, so these 3 announcements we're making over the weekend are all interconnected, but there's a little bit of foreshadowing in there for Monday's announcement on the IPCA Development Fund and how we're going to strategically connect that with the IPCA Earthshot process. Okay. Any thoughts or questions from the crowd? Otherwise, we will start to wind down the Zoom call. This Zoom call is being recorded and will be put on the website so that really we could promote it out, take snippets out of it and float them through social media. But this starts off small, but I feel it's going to grow into something quite big and powerful. What do you think, Pierre?
Yeah, I was trying to kind of offer something useful. The one thing that jumped out at me when you're speaking with the Earthshot person, the comparison to the moonshot, that kind of put things in perspective for me, that they're really looking for big cultural changing types of ideas that can then scale up at you know, the scales that are needed. And of course, because I focused on reserve housing and Indigenous housing, and I know, you know, there's already a shortage, and the AFN predicts that by, I think, 2032, there's going to be a shortage of hundreds of thousands of houses needed. So it's like, what kind of idea that combines Indigenous protected and conserved areas and with working within the territory could scale up something to build or provide hundreds of thousands of houses in the next 10 years. So just kind of framing the Earthshot Prize and that kind of scale and boldness and need for these types of solutions.
Yeah, no, I think definitely you got your finger on something there. So the Sauk Nation, we've been supporting them over the past 2 years in a Canada Mortgage and Housing Corporation project around sustainable housing that connects Chief Gordon Plennis's aspirations for an IPCA with this idea of an eco-village. So we're kind of draft calling it an IPCA eco-village. So certainly that and the Roots to Roofs initiative could be one or two nominations for the Earthshot Prize for sure. And that, yeah, that impact for housing is absolutely massive. The amount of economic stimulation and the investment in the future for children growing up in a mold-free environment with good water supply and such. Absolutely, that needs to be taken into consideration.
Yeah, and I always take to heart some of your comments about mature cultures, and you're seeing more and more where Indigenous cultures are saying, we're the best ones to show you the path forwards when it comes to climate change and natural disasters and all these things happening. We've been here since time immemorial. And you know this, we're working on a housing project with Akum First Nation, and it's focused on elders aging in place, because that's sort of an ancient wisdom of reverence for elders and keeping them an integral part of the community, living multi-generationally. And COVID showed that our taking care of our seniors is failing miserably. I think it's 80+% of people that died from COVID are in seniors care. So looking at Indigenous ways of revering elders and living in community offers a solution for all of society. So all of a sudden our project is that much more important and impactful. So
yeah, exactly. Okay, well, lots to think about. The gentleman who's Zadia, he had his hand up, but I think he dropped off too. But if anyone else has any questions or comments, I mean, obviously stay tuned for the process to come. We'll be launching a website right now. It's just a tab on our website, the Isak Olam Foundation's website, but we're going to be creating a standalone website that'll host these IPCA innovations. That's one of our strategies on growth. We're not looking, Isaac-Walam doesn't want to become a 200-person employer or something like this. Our growth model is very different, where we kind of incubate ideas and then make them stand alone. So I see that happening quite possibly with this process. Any closing words from you, Emily, as we wrap up here? Sorry if you're having internet problems or such there.
I'm not having internet problems. I'm having turtle problems. A turtle entered this house. Surprised me. Imagine being surprised by a turtle. I was shocked, and then I thought, how is it possible to be surprised by the slowest moving, oldest being? But anyways, yeah, just thank you. It's really nice to meet everyone and be connected, and I look forward to being connected through this good work and these good ideas in the future. I loved hearing Joe Martin's name come up. Joe's been a good friend of mine for the last while, and he's taught me so much about, natural law, and I've had the privilege of visiting those territories as well. And yeah, I'm grateful for everyone's time and space and sharing your words and thoughts, and that we're all brought together. I can't help thinking, in these times that feel very polarizing and divisive, that, if we can change all the external systems we want, but if we don't make those internal changes to the internal systems, we're just going to end up repeating a lot of the same patterns. So I love that this conversation kind of wove in and out of the Earthshot Prize and different initiatives, and then also some internal introspections and how that, relates to the internal and external systems that we're looking at and working on together. So that felt really cool to be a part of today. So hi, thank you so much from the so-called South, depending on which way you're holding the map.
Awesome. All right. Thank you for those words of wisdom to close us off with, Emily. And thanks again to everyone who joined us, and look forward to seeing you again tomorrow, hopefully. Have a great